I'm kind of nervous to dive into this topic today because it is a bit of a controversial one, but it's kind of the age-old dilemma that people with mental illness face, especially when they're being open and public about it on things like social media or just sharing with people in their life, the question of faking or not. And we're going to be looking at, can you fake schizophrenia? Can you fake having a mental illness in general? What does that look like? Why does it happen? And what are the implications? So I think to start off with, it's probably good to start with the accusations of faking that I myself have received by being open on this platform. Probably every day, maybe not every day, but quite frequently, I do get accusations that I am faking or making up my experiences that I'm sharing here about having schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder for attention or whatever it may be. I'm not really sure why people feel compelled to make these kinds of claims or accusations toward me, but perhaps it has to do with the fact that I rarely am struggling with symptoms when I'm presenting on camera. And so maybe it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that I do struggle with these symptoms off camera or when I'm not actively presenting on this YouTube channel and on camera. I think that also opens up the issue of, high functioning, or what I like to call more well presenting, and how there can be a huge spectrum of experience with a mental illness like schizophrenia or like schizoaffective disorder. And so when people see me functioning at a level that they maybe don't expect for someone with that illness, perhaps there is reason to believe that I am faking it or, making it up for attention or whatever the reason may be. And so perhaps it's important to just get it out there that no, I am not faking my illness. I am diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and I deal with symptoms very regularly. I know I have it. That said, getting these kinds of allegations thrown at me that people think that I'm faking it or whatever kind of open the door to questioning it myself and kind of getting lost in the notion or the thought of, well, am I faking this? Are my experiences real? And that's really enmeshed with the concept of anosognosia, which is something that people with schizophrenia often experience, as well as other mental illnesses. And anosognosia is basically when a person has a lack of insight or understanding to the fact that they have a mental illness. And this is something that, is really complicated and can be made worse by people questioning someone's mental illness or their diagnosis. I do think it is a little bit comical that I get comments like thinking that my vlog from inside the psychiatric ward at the hospital was all set up and fabricated. I think maybe I will take that as a compliment as to what people believe our skills and abilities are to create elaborate content, because there's just no way we could have staged that. It was very much my real experience. But I think maybe something that I want to encourage people to do is to believe people who are sharing their experiences with you about their struggles with their mental illness. And if they have a diagnosis, believing them in that experience, because it's difficult to share these things. And so when someone is sharing something really vulnerable and it's met with skepticism or disbelief, that can be really detrimental and harmful. Now, that said, it is a very real possibility that someone could potentially fake having a mental illness for a variety of reasons. And there's actually an article from The Verge on the issue of people kind of being influenced by what they see on TikTok and other social media platforms to believe maybe that they have DID or to fake having DID, dissociative identity disorder. It was basically about a presentation that was given by a doctor from McLean Hospital in the United States about this kind of epidemic, really, of young people imitating what they're seeing from other people who are sharing their experiences with DID and kind of faking having the illness, and how that is becoming a very real issue. Now, the article goes in depth into breaking this down further, but basically, the issue is people faking it for attention, or also people just being confused in that they may be actually really struggling with their mental health in some way, shape, or form, and they see some piece that they relate to from some content creator or whatnot who's sharing their experience, in this case of DID, and they just latch onto it and say, or convince themselves maybe that they have that too. And this is something that I do see in the comments on our own videos sometimes, where I will maybe post a short, which can only be a minute long. And so there's really not a lot of information in that type of content. And people will be commenting like that they're diagnosing themselves with schizophrenia based off of that very, very limited amount of information from me sharing a very limited bit of my experience with it. And so I think I understand that this is a really complicated issue beyond just people wanting to fake it for attention. And I think that just the way social media and information dissemination is structured right now in this day and age with social media and whatnot makes it really difficult and confusing to navigate mental health information that's being presented to us. We actually decided to kind of take action on these kinds of self-diagnosing comments and create a short that kind of drew awareness to why that can be problematic based off of short information that you see on the internet. So I'll play that right now for you.
Every person who has schizophrenia does the following 5 things. They often feel their phone vibrating in their pocket even when it's not. They rehearse conversations and arguments in their head. They take off their headphones to concentrate better. They say ouch when they bump into something even if it didn't hurt and there's no one else around. They get paranoid people in a store think they're shoplifting even if they're doing nothing wrong. Do you do any of these 5 things people who have schizophrenia do? Well, that's because neurotypical people do these things too. So this is your warning to please not self-diagnose off of videos you see on TikTok or on YouTube. Please, if you have concerns about your mental health, speak with your doctor about these concerns.
It was astounding reading the comments for this short of people who did not watch the video all the way through and were self-diagnosing themselves with schizophrenia off of the kind of ridiculous criteria that I was presenting. And I think that this is kind of just proof that we need to do a better job of having improved media literacy around things like this. But I want to kind of take a step back and go back to the Verge article and talk about how this presentation from this doctor at the university or hospital or whatever it was impacted the community of people who are living with DID. There was a really, really big pushback about this in terms of people within the DID community on TikTok and on social media and whatnot, feeling that this was a really harmful statement or idea to impose on an already highly stigmatized community. And I agree with that to an extent. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the video of the importance of believing someone when they're expressing a vulnerable bit of their experience. But the article went further to uncover and to showcase people who were coming forward on TikTok about how they were faking DID and how they were doing it for attention, or they were doing it because they were confused about their different struggles with mental health. And I know that I'm focusing on DID because this article was about DID and TikTok and whatnot, but I really feel that the same sort of thing applies to other mental illnesses like schizophrenia. I think another component of this social media element that is maybe not addressed or not talked about enough is that I myself, as a mental health content creator on YouTube, can attest to the fact that there is an element of artistic license and creativity that goes into how this is presented. Because the reality is that YouTube, social media is a bit of a game that you have to play in order to get people to watch, keep people's attention. And there is a creative element that is very much enmeshed in how the information is presented. And so just being aware of that is really, really important. I think that, a lot of times people will see something that they relate to in some way and really latch onto it overly so. I have videos where I list, 10 early warning signs of schizophrenia. And yes, they can be seen as very general and kind of universal things that people experience. And so I think that's kind of the reason why people overly self-diagnose based off of videos like that. But what's important to understand is that many mental illnesses, I think, the symptoms are kind of over-exaggerated forms of human experiences and human behaviors. And they're kind of just overblown and perhaps cause more disruption in someone's life or more dysfunction in a person's life. And so I totally understand why a lot of the content that's presented about these kinds of mental illnesses or neurodivergences on TikTok and YouTube and all these social media platforms can be really easy to kind of over-identify with a portion or several portions of what's being presented and, make the assumption or self-diagnose yourself with these conditions. And so I guess I'm really just urging you to be more media literate and more aware of how to digest this type of content and the importance of going to a doctor to really talk about and learn more about what the actual presentation of the illness entails and whether or not it could be something that you actually are experiencing. Doing a bit of research and digging for this video, I actually came across a new term to me, and that was malingering. And so what it means is basically exaggerating or feigning, faking some sort of physical or psychological illness for some desired outcome, whether that be getting attention, whether that be getting out of a prison sentence, getting medication, whatever the outcome that's desired may be. So the fact that this is a medical term clearly means that it does happen where people fake or overinflate or exaggerate symptoms of mental illnesses. Something that I want to touch on, though, in terms of digging into this idea of malingering and faking a mental illness a little bit more is just that if you are faking having a mental illness like schizophrenia, there's clearly something that is not right or that you're struggling with. I don't think that really anyone wants to live with a serious chronic mental illness like schizophrenia or DID or whatever it may be. And so there's something that is needed there that the individual is not getting, whether it is attention or support. And so I think that it might be more important to shift and look at this in terms of understanding how is society letting these people down, or how is our community or our sense of community lacking in terms of providing what these people are needing and lacking. There's an element of disconnect here between what society and our communities and whatnot are able to offer and what individuals are needing who are, choosing to or just falling into malingering behavior around mental illnesses. So I kind of got to thinking, what are some of these needs, or what are people lacking or needing in terms of deciding that they want to imitate something like schizophrenia or DID or whatever it may be. And I think an element of this is kind of the inspiration porn that is inherent in digesting content of people who are living with a chronic mental illness like schizophrenia. And I think that I definitely fall into that category a lot of the time. People see me living, by all intents and purposes, a fairly regular and full life, even with the added difficulty of schizophrenia. And it's seen as this inspiration porn kind of element where people kind of romanticize how I'm living my life with this illness. And I think that in terms of what's lacking for people from society is that life is really hard. And just keeping up with everyday life is a really difficult feat for many people, if not all people. And so I think when people see people fawning over someone with an added difficulty, like living with a mental illness, for doing kind of these simple everyday tasks that feel difficult for kind of everyone, there's an element of wanting to have that recognition as well, in terms of, hey, this is feeling really hard for me and I want acknowledgement of this. And so if I say that I have this added challenge, people will be more proud of me for doing this or will look up to me for doing this. I think it's also, as a content creator here on YouTube, something that I've really, noticed or realized throughout this journey of sharing my experience on the internet is that our most popular videos are, generally speaking, the ones where I'm suffering and sharing a lot more about what my experience looks like and what really struggling with the illness looks like. And I get that to a degree in terms of people, it resonating with people, the struggle and the realities of the illness. And I think that that's a good thing to connect on. But I think that for some people, that can be viewed as this person is getting a lot of attention for sharing this intense struggle that they're experiencing with mental illness. And I think that I want that attention, or that attention would feel good. And so that kind of makes sense to me, that people see people on social media getting this attention for sharing vulnerable experiences with their mental health and challenges with serious chronic mental illnesses, and wanting that attention themselves. And then, of course, there is the issue that I was kind of talking about before, where people are really taking it upon themselves to self-diagnose off of things that they see on the internet and on social media. And, I have read things that certain communities, such as women with ADHD, who generally were kind of forgotten about, or, just not represented in medical understandings of how it presents, because it was very based around how it presents in males, felt that they finally had a voice and some sort of connection or something to grab onto and understand themselves better through hearing from other women on TikTok or on whatever social media platforms who were sharing more about what their experience was and how it presents for women. So I get that there are definitely elements to seeing content about mental illness online and feeling like that clicks for me. But I think that an important step here that is often lacking is perhaps taking that and going to see a trained professional who can make a proper assessment and diagnosis about this. Now, that said, there is also pushback on social media around medicalized models and understandings of these things, and how they don't always accurately understand a person's experience. And yes, I get that to a degree. It's very complicated, but I do think ultimately what I'm trying to express here is that you need to have a lot of media literacy and awareness when consuming this type of mental illness content on things like TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and whatever it may be. I also want to be really mindful in sharing my thoughts in this video around faking and mental illness, to be really considerate of driving home the idea that you do need to just believe people who are sharing difficult experiences with you around their mental health and around mental illness, for reasons such as the ones that I shared, that even if what they believe is their diagnosis might not actually be correct, they're probably struggling in some way with their mental health, and there is some reason why they are presenting with this. And so believing someone when they're articulating what their experience is really important. But on an individual level, trying to, again, be media literate, media aware, be a little bit more critical about the things that you're consuming and how it pertains to your experience, and understanding that these mental illnesses, the experience is so different from person to person, and there is never going to be, this exact match between what you're seeing on the internet. And so it's really important to kind of do your own research into a mental illness that you think you may be experiencing, and take that again to a doctor to talk about that more and to kind of dig into it a little bit more from your own personal level and experience. So thank you for listening to that kind of exploration around the idea of faking and mental illness or schizophrenia. I did mention that Verge article about specifically DID and social media and faking and all that whatnot. And I will link to that in the description below if you're interested in checking out that article, because it does provide a really in-depth exploration of this dilemma, problem, issue, experience that is happening on TikTok around DID. And I think that, again, it can extend to other mental illnesses like schizophrenia. So to answer the question that was the title of this video, can you fake having schizophrenia? I think the answer is probably yes, you can, but it's a lot more complicated than that. So thank you so much for watching this video. And as always, wishing you and your loved ones good health. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.